Everyone, and welcome to our ADRA Live. We are so excited to be telling stories today with two of my colleagues. If you're watching us either via Facebook or via Twitter or LinkedIn, we are glad that you are here. We want to take some time to just update you on what we have been doing here at ADRA International and our responses around the world. And so today's ADRA Live is about telling stories. So I'm joined by two of my colleagues that are two communication professionals. They're going to be sharing with us some of the stories that they have been able to tell while being out in the field, while responding to emergency crises around the world. So I'm excited to be here with them. So to get on started, I want them to introduce themselves. So I am joined by RJ and Michael. RJ, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your position, and then we'll go on to Michael.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to our Facebook Live. My name is RJ. My position in ADRA is as a video production manager. So I take care of all of the videos, creating them, gathering them basically, and I work closely with my colleague and dear friend here, Michael. And so we've been deployed a lot in to different emergencies, but not only emergencies, but even visiting different projects around the world where ADRA is continually partnering with communities to create sustainable projects and all that. So that's our main role there. So I joined ADRA in general like 8 years ago, and it's been a great ride for me. So
absolutely. Well, we'll get into that a little bit more. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Ruben. Glad to be here with you and RJ. I'm Michael. I have been working as a communication specialist at ADRA for a little over 3 years. I had been doing some contract work before that with ADRA, doing assignments to different projects with RJ, different projects around the world, doing storytelling, and then I came on full time to do more of that focused storytelling, and also doing other communication roles within the marketing department, like speech writing, script writing, helping RJ with video production ideas. But I've very closely worked with RJ, especially the last year, and we've kind of seen our own professional growth develop as it pertains to storytelling, which is something we're always trying to make more robust, more ethical, more exciting, and it's something we've been very excited to be part of.
Great. Well, we are excited to dive in to some of the work that both of you have been doing. This is kind of like the background work that happens that a lot of people see the outcomes. They don't realize a lot of the work that goes into telling stories, making sure it's done with dignity and it's done with respect, which we're also going to talk a little bit about. And I know a lot of people always wonder, how can I get involved in ADRA? How can I enjoy telling stories. I enjoy videography. I enjoy taking photos. And now we have two of my colleagues here that can tell us a little bit more of specific work that they've done doing that exact same thing. So I want to ask you very quickly as we dive into the type of work you guys came in at a very great time, a time where we needed the type of work that you do. Which is storytelling and various things like that. So do you remember the first crisis that you were deployed to, and what was your role during that crisis? And we'll start with Michael.
I imagine we'll tell the same story because it's closely connected. I know RJ has had work with ADRA before I came along too, but a very formative experience for me was being brought on as a contractor maybe around 2017. I don't remember the time exactly, but we had training in Thailand. And then we were sent immediately, and I had just met RJ, he had just met me, and we were sent immediately from there on this tour to do the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh. And we had to, two total strangers, we never worked with each other, we didn't know each other personally at all. We didn't have any mutual friends. We were two total strangers sent on this very, difficult and traumatizing experience to see the result of a genocide, people fleeing en masse into Bangladesh. And not only did we have to quickly learn to trust each other and to work together, which I think I found very easy to do with RJ, but we had to sort through all those basic getting to know somebody in the context of a massive crisis where we're not sleeping much, we're not eating much, we're witnessing, just abject trauma and terror and horror and all these things. And so it was incredibly eye-opening for me, having never done that before. And also very affirming to see my colleague RJ as well being supportive not only of the work and the ethical storytelling, but also kind of nurturing my growth at ADRA and kind of welcoming me in as the new guy, the contractor, and experiencing this kind of eye-opening, perspective shifting experience that we're navigating together, and just trying to figure out, how do we tell these stories? How do we work together? What is the purpose of stories? And RJ can go into more detail with us too, because when he came on with ADRA, there wasn't a lot of video storytelling, and so he especially, but the two of us together have kind of been developing and working on what is storytelling at ADRA. What is the potential for storytelling at ADRA? How do we start from very little in terms of what had been happening with storytelling, and kind of expand it into something that is accessible, that's ethical, that's practical, all those things. And I really go back to that first experience with the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh as the origin point for us to grapple with these ideas in a very real crisis.
Absolutely. That is a very forming position to be in when you go to that type of situation, especially when you're there to tell stories and you're trying to figure out, how does this all work? How do I do this? And it's great that you were there with RJ to kind of guide you along. RJ, do you have something similar with the same story, or what was your first experience?
Yeah, so that was my first basically deployment, we call it in ADRA, deployment and emergency. When I joined ADRA International in 2017. So that was the first time I met Michael as well. And that was, we share the same experience. So thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. But I grew up in the Philippines, and before joining ADRA International, I was with ADRA Philippines, and there I was responding locally to the disasters there. So I could remember my very first deployment, actually, professionally with ADRA, was going back to my province. So that was very personal to me, because I was with ADRA Philippines, but there was a disaster that hit my hometown and my region. So I was sent there together with my team, and that was a different kind of homecoming, one that you don't really would look forward to, but at the same time it was something necessary that needs to be done. Though it's personal, it's professional at the same time, so it's a lot of learning for me. But at the same time, I realized that this type of work is really needed. The type of work wherein you not only provide help, but you also tell the stories of the people that's been affected by that disaster, or the people that needs that help, and also the people who all together, help each other. So everybody can find a better life after a disaster. So it's very important to tell those stories as well. So telling stories in a disaster setting is multi-dimensional, and I always believe that communication is a form of aid. When we tell these stories, we're able also to save lives. That's how I began with that. With ADRA and with this type of work.
That's really powerful, that communication is a form of aid, because I think that a lot of us and a lot of people that see the work that ADRA does, they kind of don't realize that the stories that they're hearing, the things that the reports coming back, come from our storytellers, come from people that are out there. And we almost kind of take it for granted, if you will, but there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to get that done. And we're seeing how it started for you guys. Someone who is a storyteller like Michael, who is a great writer, to a videographer like you, RJ, to be able to go out into the field and kind of be shaped here and learning more of how to respond to these crises, and seeing the work that you do as aid. So I want to ask this next one, but before I do, I want to make sure that we're having our people that are watching us to remind them to check out our website at adra.org. You can go there, get some more information, and check out some of the stories that have been posted as well, to remind them to get on adra.org. There's so many different resources there to learn about the work that we are doing, some of the stories, some of the videos that RJ and Michael have worked on, so to make sure to check that out. I do want to ask you guys, how do you know when you're out in the field that a story is worth telling, or how do you choose, if you will, the story to tell? Very briefly, how do you figure that out? Because that's something that can be a little bit complicated. I'm sure when you're there, it's kind of overwhelming. Even when you're explaining, Michael, your first deployment, I'm sure you look around and you say, people got to know what's going on. So how do you know where to narrow in and what stories to tell?
A big part of it that we found is really trusting our ADRA colleagues around the network. They do a really wonderful job of already knowing the community, already knowing the needs. Often we'll come into a disaster having never been to that country before. And so we won't know the language, we won't understand some of the culture. And so having our local colleagues, wherever we go, to meet us there, already in their head having an understanding of what we're looking for, and they kind of help us to find the right people, to find the translators, to understand the cultural considerations to get to these stories. And I think it's important to remember too that everybody has a story, and no story is more important or less important than any other stories. In the context of what we do, it's kind of a matter of finding what is an example of something, first of all, that somebody wants to share with us, because not everybody wants to share stories, and that's their right to not share stories. But there are people who really do want to share, and I loved what RJ said about it being a form of aid. There are people, and we've seen this, who really feel like a weight has been lifted off them just by sharing the story. So looking for those people, and just being mindful of the context of what's going on, where are we, what are we doing, who are we trying to serve, and finding the people that are most evident of what we're there to do, and most willing to, I guess, share their story, to share their hearts. RJ, feel free to add anything.
No, that was brilliant. Obviously, we are always motivated by the desire to tell the need stories out in the field, because whenever we're sent to a disaster zone and a disaster area, we are all aware that people there need help that is life-saving. So that is a key motivation when we go to the field, to explore and tell the stories of what these people are going through and what needs to be provided for. So if you're in particular, it's very helpful to know about the situation before actually going into that location, so if a disaster has just happened, reading about it helps you be informed about which stories to tell. And when you go to the field, like what Michael was saying, it's always very helpful to coordinate and to work closely with the locals there, with the communities there, the leaders. And luckily for us, we have ADRA offices everywhere. So, and our churches as well. So it's easy to connect to the right people to help us find the right stories. So we're almost pampered that way. But it's the responsibility is also in our hands to make sure that, like what Michael is saying, we're able to explore all the different stories that need to be told.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about preserving the dignity of the storytelling. How do you go about preserving the dignity and honor when you're telling these stories? Because these are very delicate stories sometimes that you're sharing, especially in a crisis. And as Michael's mentioned, there's some people who don't want to share their stories, and that's their right. So what are some of the ways that you go about your storytelling to preserve that dignity?
For me, it starts with understanding that you are an outsider, an external person going into the community, and that establishes the relationship and expectations, and it points towards respect first and foremost. So even though we come in as ADRA, some people may look at us as as saviors or whatever.
Sure.
But you have to make sure that your feet is on the ground and your heart is in the right place when you go there, to make sure that you are able to see the communities the same level, eye to eye, not like you're somebody going into the community and like you expect to be treated this way. So I guess that establishes the relationship that you have as a storyteller towards the communities. So I always want to start there, like remind yourself that you are an external person, you do not belong to the community, and you are basically interrupting them to get those stories. So always have that kind of respect towards them. So and then that just has a domino effect on how you will conduct the stories. Once you come in with respect towards the community, then it would be easy for you to conduct your work under the principles, preserving dignity, respecting values, cultural norms that are present in the local. So that's one thing that I want to start with, and then Michael can carry on, I guess.
I agree with that, and I think another important element is to make sure that the person whose story you're trying to get or talk to, they have to be fully informed of what is about to happen and what to expect as an outcome. It's one thing to say, hey, can I take your picture? And they'll be like, sure, not knowing that it might be used as a marketing campaign or something down the road. And they could feel manipulated. They could feel taken advantage of. And so we always have the intentionality to say, we're here with ADRA. We want to tell your story. We want to share it with our audience. It could end up on Facebook. It could end up in these forums. You might be used in videos. So we always want to make it very clear that we're not just extracting information without their understanding and then going away to use it for 30 years to come. And, all these things, they have to be partners in the process. And so I think that is a key element, ensuring that they feel like partners in the process, because then they'll feel like they can trust us and like the story is safe with us. And I think an extra element too is RJ and I really hold each other accountable, and a lot of our other colleagues do too. And we have this kind of open relational experience where we can say, hey, did we do that right? What's our plan for this? What could we do better? How are we going to ensure dignity? All these things. And so because we have that kind of professional and personal relationship, we're able to ensure that we're coming from the same perspective, on the same page, understanding the process, and not feeling like one is blindsiding the other or doing something improperly. We've been through this many times together, and we never feel perfect. We never feel like we can't learn. And so we're always trying to hold ourselves accountable, ask the local staff whose language and culture we're intruding on, asking them to hold us accountable. And so we don't think we're above the law. We don't think we're above rules of storytelling or ethical consideration. So we really try to, I guess, come from a place of humility. And I loved what RJ said. We are outsiders. And so we have to have that place of humility, because it's not our home. It's not our story. It's not our disaster. We're coming in to tell the story, but we really want to try to partner with them. We want to make them feel like they have an equal footing, like they have something that's theirs that they can give to us if they choose, and we will try to honor and protect it.
I really like storytelling is a collaborative process for us. So.
Yeah, and I really like what you guys are saying, because a lot of us don't see the ins and outs of what it takes. And I really like what you said with respect and accountability that you have for one another, but preserving that dignity. Because in hearing what you're saying, it's almost like these people that agreed to tell their stories are handing to you something that's alive and breathing and saying, please take care of it. Please take care of the story and tell it in a dignified way. And I can truly see that you guys take that honor seriously and do well in telling their story. Michael, I'm sorry, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I agree. We do take it very seriously, and it's something I think we never get casual about. It's a very obviously not every story can take hours and hours. Sometimes we have to move quickly, but we always ensure a minimum threshold has been met of interacting with the family or the person, explaining who we are, explaining the purpose. But if we can afford the time, we always try to spend more time. The end result of what somebody might see in a video or a blog or a caption is just the end result of what might have taken us hours of getting to the home. I can think of when we were in Colombia recently, working with the migrants there coming from Venezuela, and just getting to this one person's house. It took us an hour of navigating these back alleyways, getting lost, trying to find it again, and then spending a lot of time with this family in ways that don't always reflect completely in the end result. But it's important work for us to ensure that we're meeting all, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, so that the person whose story we're getting feels like we're putting in work for them. It's almost like a courtship. Like, we're putting in work for you because we think you're worth it.
Yeah, no, that's massively important in what you're doing, and just hearing the ins and outs again of what you do, and finding that story and treating it with the dignity that it deserves. It's so good to hear that final outcome has a lot of thought process behind it. I do want to spend a little bit of time on, maybe you guys can share some stories yourselves that have impacted you on your journey through doing storytelling for ADRA International. So I know, I'll start with you, Michael. I know there's something that you wanted to share of a story that kind of impacted you recently as you were deployed to an emergency crisis, because you guys obviously have your titles for ADRA International, but when you go out into the field, you're part of the emergency response team. And again, I enjoy what RJ said, communication is aid, and now you're out there providing that aid through communicating stories. So Michael, what is one story that you can share with us and the audience watching?
Yeah, a recent story is from Romania. About a month ago, I went there in context of the Ukraine crisis. And obviously, being part of an emergency response team, it can feel a bit rushed. It can feel frantic. You can kind of feel like, oh, I need to get my bearings. I need to quickly do all these tasks. And you can, if you're not careful, start to operationalize human suffering, and it can be a dangerous territory to forget you're dealing with real people and real stories, because you can feel like I'm a person who has to figure out, X, Y, and Z. And so I remember going to a church in Romania, and they had converted completely to welcome the refugees coming into this asylum center, essentially. And I wanted to get some photos. I wanted to talk to some people. And well, I may not have admitted it at the time. I think looking back, I had a little bit of an operational mindset. Like, these are the checklist items. I need to get these kinds of photos, these kinds of stories. And I started talking to this woman, Victoria, and she spoke English. So I didn't have to have a translator. And she was just talking to me in English. And after a while, I started to feel, I didn't realize at the time I had it, but I felt this unconscious shifting of no longer thinking as a professional, no longer thinking as like a marketer or part of a communications team. I felt like a human who was there listening to another human. And I that little voice you have in your head sometimes, like, oh, this would be a great quote for this story, or this would be a great angle for this photo, that kind of got silenced. And I just sat there for about 2 hours, just talking to this woman, Victoria. And in the end, we were both kind of crying, and she was very open with me, very vulnerable about her experience and her story. And I had done all the things about, explaining where this might go, and trying to get the right consent, and explaining the purpose. And so she felt comfortable knowing that the story could be shared and could be used for this audience. But I think too, she saw that I wasn't trying to just extract a story like I'm pulling teeth or something. And while sometimes you might have that mindset a little bit, and I always try to challenge myself, and I love that RJ challenges me on that too. We hold each other accountable to make sure we're not operationalizing these stories. But feeling that little voice turn off in my head, and just being aware that the first part of being a humanitarian is being a human and respecting the humanity in others. And so while I might be here in a professional capacity as part of a marketing and a communications team, I am first and foremost a human listening to another human. And that really shifted something in me, that not even being aware that I had still that slightly unconscious voice trying to operationalize, trying to think of the work that had to be done. And just listening to her story, and like really asking her questions that probably would not ever be used in a blog or not be used in the story, because they were more about her experience, as a mother, or in her professional capacity as a graphic designer. We probably wouldn't share all those details just for sake of time, and our website. But I really felt this transformational experience of realizing I'm just here engaging with another person who feels the trust and the desire to share something. And she talked to me about feeling unburdened, like it had helped her to share the story, which was such a again a transformational experience for me to use like what RJ's saying, that communication as aid. It felt like I was able to offer some kind of service in ways that I didn't totally understand until having that again with her, where I could see this unburdening happening, and I could feel this this connection that we were having. And I've had that a few different times, like Hurricane Dorian in Haiti. I saw in Bahamas with a Haitian migrant I talked to, undocumented a young woman in Thailand. Different people will remind you, even though we've done this many times, I still need reminding that I'm not here only as a communication specialist, but I am here to just meet with people, to just listen to them. And those reminders are always needed and always cherished.
Yeah. Wow. It's so powerful to hear your story of, you go in there with that mindset as a communicator, as a marketer, but you always have that humanity. And when you are face to face with these people that are in this crisis, just that empathy takes over, and you kind of just roll into that. And that's so powerful to hear. It makes those stories that you tell much more impactful, because we know it comes from a place of true connection. Was there anything else? Sorry, I felt like you wanted to say something.
No, that's okay.
All. Awesome. RJ, let's turn to you. I know you also have some impactful story that you wanted to share with us.
Yes, I actually would like to show a video clip of. Oh, there it is. So
So
I have no idea what they're saying to me, but just to put that in context, we were visiting a refugee camp in Lebanon that has Syrian refugees for years, and so we visited a school. So what you're seeing there is like a makeshift school. It's just a tent, really, where they put the children together, and it's probably a kindergarten classroom where they put the kids there, and they're probably they're learning how to write and read, and that's their. I mean, I remember the teacher was saying, "Okay, we have a visitor. Welcome." Then they started singing. It just took me back right straight when I was a student, back in the Philippines and all that. And whenever I go to an area that's been struck by disasters, it affects a lot of people, obviously, the entire community. But there's something about the fragility, vulnerability of children that makes your work even more meaningful. Because when you see these young people, the future generation going through the trauma of a disaster, it could break your heart, personally. And so, but professionally, it inspires you also to keep doing your work and what you intend to do in that community. So, I grew up in the Philippines, and we're always battered by disasters. So the hometown that I'm in, it's like the welcoming town to every major hurricane / typhoon in the Philippines. So I remember when I was a child, my education would be disrupted by these typhoons because it will just ravage the entire town and destroy our schools, and that we won't have electricity, so everything would be put on hold. So whenever I see children going through these disasters, it just reminds me of of my own experience, and that the children always remind me to do my best, when it comes to doing work for ADRA. It's no matter what I do, no matter what outcome it will have, it's always them that inspires me the most. So when I saw them, I just saw these children in Syria, sorry, the Syrian children in Lebanon, and they're still being children, they're still playing, they're still singing and all that, as if nothing happened. You kind of wanted to help them move on with their lives. So all the more that I wanted to tell the stories of these communities, so that help can be provided and they can rehabilitate and they can move forward with their lives. So that's a picture of me just showing sometimes the shots that I took of them, and it's this little boy here is named I think Solomon. And Michael and I met him in Poland. So they're Ukrainians that have fled to Poland, and they're being housed in this hotel that is being run by our church, and that has become a refugee center there. So, and by the way, our interaction with children has consent with obviously with their parents, and they allow us to take pictures and stuff like that. So, but we wanted to make sure that we portray children also in a nice and dignified way. So yeah, it makes you even appreciate your work when you have these interactions with the stories that you're pursuing. And that's what Michael was also trying to say, about spending time with them, so that they don't just end up as texts or photos. We bring back to for our audience to see, but we wanted to make sure that they feel like they're humans, and they and our presence there is just us being newfound friends for them. We're trying to know what happened, and so hopefully we can provide aid to the stories that we're going to be telling.
And again, I can't say it enough. I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, I just want to add one quick thing. Seeing that picture of RJ with that little boy Solomon, it reminded me of something to add to the question of ethical storytelling, and also just what I've learned from RJ over the years is he'll often show people pictures that he's taken of them after he's taken it, and they'll get to see what they look like in that picture. And sometimes they'll even make comments and take different pictures. And it reminds me, having seen RJ do that, I did the same thing with that woman, Victoria, in Romania. And I took a few pictures with her outside of the church, and I showed them to her. And she said, "Oh, I don't like my frown lines in this picture. Can you take it again?" And obviously, the kind of cold marketing side would say, "Oh, but this is the one that shows that you came from a crisis, you're suffering, that kind of thing." But I realized, no, she wants to look good in her pictures too. Like people will see this, and she has the right to. And so I took this picture, and she looked at it, and she liked that she was smiling a little more, and she had less of what she didn't like in the previous pictures. And I just deleted those previous pictures because she didn't want them shared, and I feel like that's her right. And that's something I've really
Absolutely.
learned from RJ over the years too.
Wow, that's so powerful. In that moment there, you're truly preserving the dignity, letting them know, hey, we truly value the story and we truly value you as a person. And just
Absolutely.
hearing the stories you guys are telling, you can see humanity and empathy running through all the work that you do. And again, us on the other side, we see the final photo or we see the final video, but now we see even more just the depth of humanity and empathy that runs through your stories and through your videos and photography. So we truly, truly appreciate the work that you're doing as you go out into the field. Man, time has just flown by. I'm sure you could tell so many more stories, but I want to give you guys the last word before we sign off. I want to remind people that are watching, again, you can get more information at adra.org, hop onto our website, learn more of the stories that RJ, Michael, and their team have told throughout the world and various responses to crisis. But I just want to give you guys the last word here as before we sign off. You know, we have a lot of people that are interested in the work that you do, a lot of people that are aspiring photographers, are aspiring storytellers, videographers, if you will. What word of advice or what, as they are out there telling stories, what's one thing that you've learned through your job and through the various interactions you've had that you can share with them and say, hey, remember this as you're telling these stories. It can be anywhere in the world that you are, but remember this. What would you say? And I know you guys are thinking about it, but either Michael or RJ, whoever wants to start, what piece of advice would you give yourself? Maybe we'll put it that way. You would have given yourself as you started, and now you will give to someone else. RJ, if you're nodding your head like you already got it.
All right. So, well, what I wanted to, tell somebody out there who's probably has already found his or her passion in storytelling, I would tell him or her that it's just the start. The next big question that I think you want to answer is, what are you doing it for, and who do you want to do it for? Because in that sense, you'll find a bigger meaning in what you're doing, in the craft that you're doing. As for us here in ADRA, it's for obvious reasons. We want to provide aid, and like what I've said at the start of our conversation, I truly believe that storytelling is aid, communication is aid. It could sometimes be the first, step in saving someone else's life. So that for me, it answers the question: who am I doing this work for? Why am I doing it? So I think for the young people out there, it's really good to find your passion and find a purpose behind that passion. So I hope we're able to share, a form of direction to our audience, our young people out there who's trying to figure out what else to pursue, as a passion.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, I would say no matter where you are in your life or your career, especially if you're interested in storytelling, always nurture and celebrate curiosity and empathy. I think if you're not curious and if you don't care, not only will the story not be any good, but you won't have any fun, you won't feel anything. And I know for a fact, speaking on behalf of RJ and myself, that we really feel for the stories, the people, the circumstances, and it makes it not only rewarding, but it makes it enjoyable. We have we find rewards from being able to have this relationship with people, and it really comes from just nurturing empathy and curiosity, asking what you want to know, not what you think you need to ask, or take a picture that you think you need to take, but just follow where that curiosity, where that passion, and where the empathy takes you. And I think you'll be delighted and surprised by the results.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much. Where the empathy takes us, I want to finish on that note because communication is an aid, as RJ stated. And so again, we want to thank you both for joining us, RJ and Michael. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. We look forward to hearing more stories about what ADRA is doing out on the field, and specifically what you guys have been telling with your storytelling. And now we know the background behind it. So again, thanks very much. And for those of you watching, we want to thank you again for joining us. Again, adra.org for more information. And if you're joining us via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, thank you for joining us, and be on the lookout for our next ADRA Live to learn more about what we're doing here at ADRA. Again,